Zdravo, šta ima Buraz? Ja sam Spencer i imam 18 godine. Ja sam iz Engleska i učio sam hrvatski jedan mjesec. Ne pričam ili razumijem vrlo dobro, ali pričam malo. Hrvatski je mnogo težak i ima izgovor vrlo složen. Počeo sam učiti hrvatski zato što prije 2 mjeseci išao sam u Hrvatskoj. Također išao sam u Bosnu i Crnu Goru i je bio odmor vrlo dobro, zemlja lijepa. Tamo u Hrvatsku pričao sam čovjek i imao sam mnogo komplimente. U buduće želim putovati u Hrvatskoj opet i živjeti u Zagreb, zato što tako mogu učiti i pričati još hrvatski. So, yeah, you can see my Croatian isn't quite perfect, and I'm not saying I speak it fluently because I don't. But I only studied for a month, and it's a very difficult language, the most difficult language I've ever tackled out of the 4 I speak. Well, I mean, English wasn't that difficult for a start. But, I mean, when I spoke it to the people out there, to the locals, their reactions were amazing. Reactions that I've never had to speaking a language to natives before. They were just so surprised that I just knew a few words and could say them correctly. So it was really cool experience learning it for a month. And as I say, I want to go out there again and properly learn it to a decent conversational fluent level. I feel like that's something I'm going to do when I go there rather than carrying on with it because sada učim Talijanski. But in this video, I'm going to go through how I went about learning Croatian for a difficult language. Basically, only my 3rd language learning experience, apart from Spanish, which I've half taught myself as well as being in school. Croatian was my first time of going, okay, you know what you're doing now, but this is the first time you're properly teaching yourself a language. So I started off, I literally just finished my A-levels. I'd come home from my last A-level exam and I was like, well, I'm going to Croatia in 4 days. I'm going to start learning Croatian. It was my plan from the start to learn as much Croatian before going out there. And so I just kicked off with it in the exact same way that I would with any language, in the exact same way I have with Italian. And I just went straight to common sayings and learned as many as I could and picked up words from there and picked up verbs and just learned and just threw as many verbs, words, sayings into one Anki deck as much as possible to just put as much Croatian in my brain as possible before going out there. As well as doing this with all the words, I also did the Pimsleur course, which is only one 30-lesson course, and I did as many lessons of those as possible before going out to Croatia. So now I've got all my words in a deck. I had hundreds and hundreds of words, and I don't recommend doing this, but I was rushing and trying to learn as much of this language before going there, almost as like a fun challenge, which was really good fun. I can remember almost spending the whole flight over to Dubrovnik reviewing words on my Anki deck, which was just ridiculous, but I was so motivated to learn as much Croatian when I go out there. So we land in Dubrovnik and suddenly I'm just surrounded by the language. There's a lot of people who speak English out there, don't get me wrong, and they mainly spoke English to us. But just going around the streets and just seeing so many different words I didn't know, I'd add them to onto my notes on my phone, and then once I go back to the hotel, I then put them back onto my Anki deck and just review more. My studying time, of course, slowed down whilst I was out there. I wasn't reviewing my words as much. I wasn't doing as many Pimsleur courses because I was enjoying the holiday, which is what I should be doing, and it's such an incredible place. If you ever get the chance to go to the Balkans, I'd just go because it's an incredible place. But I can remember in the beginning, despite doing all this learning with the intention to speak to people when I went out there, being such a, really enjoying learning languages, just coming off the back of almost, pretty much conversational fluency in Spanish. I wanted a new challenge, and I went out there, and for the first 3-4 days, I was too scared to speak to anyone, which is really weird to say. I put in all this time and effort and I was too scared to speak to people. And I don't know why I was scared to speak to people. Maybe it was a fear of not being able to hold a conversation when they replied after saying whatever I wanted to say. But when it came to ordering food and whatever, maybe I'd say, oh, Havala, like every other local. I mean, every other tourist. But yeah, for some reason, I just didn't want to speak. But then it suddenly flipped to me. I was like, I've learnt this language to speak to people. Spencer, you need to put into practice what you've been learning here, otherwise it's going to all go to waste. And it's such a massive opportunity to go to the country and just have the chance to speak to natives, because I don't really know anybody from England who speaks Serbo-Croat. So it ended up being that there was a lot of amazing experiences with speaking the language. However, out of all of this, there's one moment that really sticks out to me, and it was an Italian restaurant, and I'd ordered the food in Croatian, and it's an Italian restaurant. I know the words for food. I say pasta, risotto, whatever. Like, it's the same. It's not difficult. I don't have to say the food in Croatian. The food is the same because it's Italian food. But the fact I just said, oh, I want this, she wants this, can we have this please, water, stuff like this, beer. The guy was so surprised, the waiter was so surprised that after we left, he waited and he shook my hand and said, congratulations on learning the language, because I think only by that point I'd only been studying about 1-2 weeks. And it's such an amazing moment, even though I couldn't really speak that well and we couldn't really hold a conversation because I wasn't at that level. It was just such a cool moment, and it just shows how much they appreciate you learning the language, even to such a small scale. I think the thing he was most impressed by was pronunciation, and that's something I'd learned from doing the Pimsleur course. I can imagine a lot of tourists come over and they say thank you wrong, or they say whatever wrong, and it's just the fact I put in the effort to say this and that, and that's something that actually really inspires me to carry on with my other languages. And I hope it's something that also inspires you to help to carry on with your language, because that feeling, if you have experienced it already or haven't experienced it yet, is such an amazing feeling. It's something you should really chase in your language learning journey. Anyway, back to how I learned Croatian. So I had many of these brilliant experiences speaking to people. As I say, my studying did slow down whilst I was in Croatia, but as soon as I got back, I got straight back on it and I carried on learning. I didn't stop. Even though I'd just come back, I'd almost became hooked on the language. So over the next few weeks, I worked towards the goal of holding a conversation on a Pimsleur class. So I kept on doing what I was doing. I got a bit of a half grammar, really early beginners, almost like a child's textbook from Croatia, and that helped me learn some new words and stuff, because when you're learning a language like Croatian, there's not much material online. I couldn't listen to any Netflix shows, there wasn't any of them. I couldn't use any side apps like Duolingo or anything. It was literally just reviewing words, no short stories. So all the stuff I've talked about on how to learn languages, I couldn't really do any of that. It was just reviewing words and speaking as much as possible. I then ended up having 2 italki lessons after all this reviewing and everything, and they were difficult, really, really tough, especially the first one. But I came out of them, I was like, yeah, I do speak basic Croatian. I've almost achieved this little goal that I wanted to do, and I don't speak perfectly. If there's any Croatians or anybody speaks Serbo-Croat listening to the start of this video, you've probably picked up on so many pronunciation and grammar mistakes that it's ridiculous. But you can understand what I was saying, I hope. If not, then I don't speak it very well. But you can understand what I was saying, and that's the goal I wanted to get across with Croatian. So if you're studying a language that doesn't have many online materials, maybe a lot of language learning apps don't teach it, but you really want to learn it before maybe travelling to that country, or maybe because you have friends or families that speak it, just go for it. Just go for it. It might take a bit longer because it may be more difficult. It might take a bit longer because, as I say, there's not as much material. But just go for it, because it will come. And there'll be people online to speak to. There'll be my mentors online to speak to. And there's always going to be online material about words and sayings and stuff like this. You're always going to find that. Just keep reviewing that, because it will come. What I do recommend you do, if you can't listen as much or you can't find as many podcasts that match your interest, just when you're going around in your daily life, just think and speak in the language, because that will get it into your head as well, and that will get the rules and the ways you want to talk in your head. And if there's words that stand out to you that you can't quite grasp, then you look them up and you also add that to your deck. Croatian was my first experience of learning a language that's not so popular. It's not necessarily, when you hear people who want to learn language, that it's normally French, German, Italian, like I am right now. But Croatian was my first experience of a language that doesn't have as much material, and that's why to really finish it off and go to fluency, I would like to live there for a bit. But if you just want to get to a basic level, it's 100% possible, and I hope my story with Croatian inspires you to keep going if you're struggling, or just go for it if you haven't started yet. And yeah, it's a great journey, language learning. It's a great time, and it brings so many cool experiences, especially if you're traveling to the country where you're going to speak it. So guys, hvala puno, do viđenja I vidimo se kasnije.